All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Minnesota Watercolor Society Spring Exhibition. I am acting president Dan Kuchenbecker, and it is a pleasure to... Well, it is an absolute pleasure to be here tonight at this beautiful show. Now, thank you for that round of applause, but I think a much bigger thank you is owed to our spring co-chairs, Laura Berg and Missy Moore, for this beautiful show they've put on. Let's have a big round of applause. Thank you so much. Now, before we get the awards ceremony going, we do have a few things we need to distribute to some of our members here. And, I should say this. Welcome to our members, to our guests, and to everyone on Zoom as well. Thank you for being here. I'd like to bring up Ann Bent to announce our presentation of our lifetime membership. Ann is our membership chair. Here you are.
Thank you. On behalf of the Minnesota Watercolor Society Board, we would like to really congratulate the 5 new lifetime members we have this year. Now, a lifetime member is someone who's been a member for 20 consecutive years, and they have contributed so much to our organization, and we like to give back and congratulate them. Georgia Candico, Deb Magelson, Darlene Mowry, Z. Evans, and Terry Sario. And if you are here, would you come up for your...
All right, thanks, Ann. All right, next we have Julie Creamer up. She is our membership chair and is here to bring up some of our new signature members. So here you go, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. I'm here to introduce 5 new signature members. Signature membership is kind of a point system. So you earn points by doing things like getting into the fall show, getting into the spring show, getting awards at the shows, being on the board, such things. You need to accumulate 6 points in 5 years. So these folks are really talented. We have 5 new signature members tonight, and I have some plaques and some brand new signature pens. I'm going to call you up one at a time, and we'll give you those things. But before I do that, 2 quick notes. If you're one of the 5 people, if you could find me right after the ceremony, I'm going to take your photo. And if you are in the audience and you're a signature member already, we have the signature pins for you. So if I didn't find you on your way into the building, if you could also come and find me, I would love to give you a pin. So, with that, let's start with Deb Zeller. If you could come on up, all the way up. Thank you. Again, CWP. You said the beautiful class.
I shake your hand. We'll move with some of the artistic fun. Just transfers over.
You'll be here. All right. Doug. Thank you, Doug. And we got Pat Swanson. Ooh, she's here. She comes. He's going to give it to her.
Just open. Good enough.
Down. And we have Karkeet Chung. I know you're here, Karkeet. There he is. Okay. All right. With them. And thank you so much. Congratulations. All right. And we have Laura Berg. I know Laura Berg is here tonight. Congratulations. Okay. Thank you. And I'm going to get the next one. You just stay there. Because the next one is Dan Kuchenbecker. That's right. Come on down. Okay. You got time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Julie. Next we have Laura Berg. So let's do another round of applause. Yeah. All right,
You know, as much as I like to talk, I hate getting up in front of groups and having to talk. So we wanted to make sure that we spent some time tonight to thank all of our sponsors. We had an amazing group of sponsors donate towards our awards. So in addition to our checks that each of the awards got, everyone has gift certificates. There's some merchandise in some of them, all kinds of things. I think we had $4,700 between checks and all the other donations, which is just so much bigger than we've ever had. And the reason we have that is Art Weeks. Art, would you just stand up? Art went out and got all of the donations this year. So thank you very, very much. All right. I would like to introduce our judge, John Salmonen. I had the opportunity to take a workshop with John last fall. Talk about being intimidated. He said, show up with a full-size drawing of an urban landscape. I don't draw. I sent him a couple of pictures and said, what about these? And he said, well, I like this one and this one. Bring them both. So I traced both of them. That wasn't what he meant. And then I got there and he said, oh, you need to add a lot more detail to that. I learned so much that week. He just shared his knowledge freely. But more importantly for me is he likes to joke around, and so do I. And we just had a great time. When I was putting this up here, I don't know how many initials this man has after his name. I ran out of room. Those are the 3 biggest watercolor societies in the US. I know he also has signature membership in China and Australia and many other places. So we are pleased to have him here. This piece, because, you know, I think you should get to see a piece from the judge. And so this is a piece that he did recently. It's called Times Square. He does both abstracts and urban landscapes, and probably a lot of other things too, but those are the 2 main things that I know about. He lives in Duluth. His wife Kathy is here with him tonight. So with further ado, I am going to invite John up, and we are going to start the awards, because I think that's probably what everybody was waiting for, right? It is. Evidently, we can't stand next to each other. Todd, do I need to turn mine off?
What's that?
Do I need to turn mine off?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So, shall we start? Can you move forward enough to see it? There's a danger of feedback. John can only go just so far. I'm sure he hears that from Kathy. You are pushing the edge.
Thank you very much for inviting me to join you this year. I enjoy jurying and judging very much. It's an excellent opportunity to keep abreast of our chosen field. I've been doing it for years, and it's been fun to watch styles come and styles go. And there are often a and others drop right down to the bottom. That tends to be true, but in my experience, the longer you look and the closer you look, some of the ones that popped up pretty fast start to settle back down. Oftentimes, their flash isn't accompanied with enough serious content to give them lasting interest. And some of the ones that you overlooked at first, maybe because of some technical weaknesses, continue to catch your eye, and you realize there's a story there, there's content, and they start to rise a little bit. And after about a week or 2 weeks of these things shifting up and down, you finally have to commit and make a decision. Be aware that anyone who juries a show who makes a decision on Monday would probably make different decisions on Wednesday. One time I was jurying for the National Watercolor Society, and this was back when they did slides, and we were well into the process. We were probably about on our 8th carousel, and one of my fellow judges, Carol Barnes, and we had a little remote control, yes, no, yes, no. And we got to the end of the 8th cassette, and she uttered an expletive. And we said, what happened? She says, I turned my remote upside down. She voted no for everyone showing yes. So they said, okay, we'll just go back and we'll repeat that cassette. And you know, we could hardly remember what we had voted for the first time. So that's just part of the process. People say, what can you tell us about the judging process? And what I tell people is you pick your favorites. That's what I do, that's what you would do, that's what any judge would do. Now, you could argue that the longer you have been involved in this racket and the more paintings you've seen, the more honed your judgment becomes. But the reality is you look at everything that is presented to you and you try to pick the ones that you are the most drawn to. It's always interesting to come to an event like this, where I have juried the show and where I have rejected some folks. So I know not everyone here is real thrilled to see me, but my good friend Jerry Brummer, who was taught well into his late 80s, early 90s, died during COVID, said that when you get a rejection, he said, do what I do. He said, call the judge a complete idiot. If you really have strong feelings about that painting, if you really believe in that painting, enter it in another show, and it may well win the gold medal in that show. He said, however, be aware that that judge is probably a complete idiot as well. There is no gold standard in art. There is no definition of what constitutes good art. If there were, someone would have programmed it into a computer and we wouldn't have to go through all this judging. A story that I like to tell, and forgive me if you've heard it before, I do relay this occasionally at these events, but given our age, I think a lot of you won't remember it anyway, but back in the 1850s, the premier American painter was Frederick Remington, and he achieved wealth and fame in his lifetime. The European equivalent was Monet. Because this was pre-internet, if you wanted to see Monet's work, you had to go to France to do it. So the press came up with this scheme that they would bring Remington to France and expose him to Monet's work. And the idea really caught on, and they put together this huge entourage. They sailed over to France, and the show that Monet had on display at that time was these, I'm pronouncing it wrong, but the Rouen cathedrals, which were probably as abstract as Monet ever got. So Remington went through the show, looked at all the paintings, and the press was waiting for him on the other end. And as he exited, they descended on him and said, what did you think of Mr. Monet's work? And he said, hell, I've got an aunt in upstate New York that can knit better pictures than that. So just goes to show there is no definition of what is good art. So what you got in this process is my opinion, and take it as such. We are going to take a brief look now at the award winners, and I will talk just a little bit about each one, what I saw in it, and something that I think maybe we can each take away from the painting. As you look at art, you look at other people's art, it's always a learning experience. You always see things that are significant, and sometimes those things you can take away with you and they can improve your painting as well. All right. Oh,
We didn't practice this. So our first painting, the artist is Pat Swanson. So evidently she's getting her signature status and award tonight. And this is called Reminiscing.
she here? Come on over here. And if you have anyone with you that wants to take a picture, feel free. Just come on up and do it. I think this is a significant moment. You want to make it as memorable as we can. This is a very, very lovely painting. When I look at artists' work, I have come to the conclusion over the years that more paintings fail and succeed based on how the artist uses value. And when I say value, I mean dark and light. And if you think about it, that's how we perceive the world, how we perceive darkness and shadow. And if you devote a lot of time to studying value, to thinking about value, in my workshops, I use what's called a 9-value scale, where you take and just make a continuum from the white of the paper to lamp black, and then divide it into 9 sections. That's a good teaching tool, because when you talk to people about value, then you can say, well, maybe you'd like to change this value 3 to a value 5. But the reality is it's infinite. There are an infinite number of stops between white and black. And the more subtly you can attune those variations in value, the better chance you have of replicating light and shadow, which again is how we perceive the world. And it's possible to create some very, very delicate, very effective, very convincing passages of light and shadow, which is how we replicate reality. And I think this painting is a lovely example of that. Congratulations.
Now, my trick in this is to not turn too many pages up here on my paper one. So, another honorable mention to Tara Sweeney, and this is called A Perfect Pair.
Congratulations. This painting of 2 young ladies sitting either on a hilltop, sitting on a beach. We don't necessarily know for sure. It doesn't really matter. Just as an incidental point, I love the cast-off pair of shoes. There's something about that that gives it an air of realism. As you look at the figures, they're very closely defined. A lot of attention to light and shadow, and handled in a very, very representational way. And then we have this background, which, as I said, it could be we are looking down at pounding surf, or we are looking in the distance. That could be a hill in the lower left-hand corner, and that could be a very dramatic sky. It doesn't matter, because what's important about this painting and what makes it so interesting to look at is the difference in style, the difference in technique, and the difference in effect between the 2 figures and the background. Almost realism versus abstraction. tight, not in a negative way, but in a controlled way, versus the spontaneity of exciting marks on the page. And the two complement each other very, very well. They say if you ate nothing but desserts, you'd eventually get sick of desserts. So you need some broccoli in there to make the dessert to really be able to appreciate the dessert. It's this concept of contrast where the two components strengthen and enhance each other. And I think this is the visual equivalent of that contrast, handled very, very skillfully. Congratulations.
They should just not let me have a microphone. Our last honorable mention is Ann Cecil. Sissel. But I didn't get it right at all. I'm sorry. And it is called Good Karma Circle of Life.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
When I was in college, majoring in art, abstract expressionism was in vogue. It was the only thing being taught in colleges, art schools around the country. And I say taught, there really wasn't much teaching going on. But that's what we all did, was learn to become abstract expressionists. And I came away with a real love for abstract expressionism. One of the things that we had to deal with is we were all sort of embarrassed by our marks on the page. They always seemed to look too contrived and to lack spontaneity. We were all encouraged, you don't paint from the wrist, paint from the shoulder, stand back and make the marks as bold as you can. We used to tie our paintbrushes to broom handles and stand back. There was a painter named Eve Klein who would put balloons full of paint on the canvas and shoot them with a .22, all to achieve this effect, this look of spontaneity. When I saw this painting, I thought, this is truly an example of how wonderful spontaneity can be. I really feel that this painting was done from the shoulder, not the wrist. And then at the end, correct me if I'm wrong, you went back in and added what the California fast and loose watercolors used to call calligraphy. That was the last thing they did at the end of the painting, is just went in and put in some fine marks, not to define the objects as much as to add a contrast between the boldness, the spontaneity, the freshness of these swatches of paint, to give a little contrast, to set up that relationship between two different things. And I think those beautiful dark lines in a great ratio. When you deal with contrast visually, a good ratio to go for is 80-20. 70-30 works. 60-40, you're too close to the dreaded 50-50. This is a very nice ratio of about 80% from the shoulder, spontaneous, fast and loose, and then about 20% tighter and more controlled. And the two complement each other beautifully. The tightness of the control makes the spontaneity of the large marks even more powerful. Congratulations.
Our first award of merit is Deborah Everson for Big Mouth.
Congratulations.
Speaker.
Do you fish?
The walleye.
Excuse me, go ahead.
It's fly fishing, yeah.
Anybody who fishes knows things happen very, very quickly. If you're a fly fisherman, when the fish hits that fly, they know instantly it ain't the real deal. And if you're not quick on the draw, you lose the fish. It's not the kind of thing that you can sit down and do a careful study of a posed subject. You've got to be able to capture the spontaneity and the instantaneous quality of the subject matter. I think this painting does that beautifully. As I look at this painting, I see nothing but exploding motion occurring on the surface of the paper. All of those spontaneous marks in the background convey that feeling of something happening very, very quick and very spontaneously. And then once again, talking about this 80-20 ratio, then going back in and the little sharp teeth and the eyeball really brings the whole thing together. My former teacher and mentor, Ching-Ki Chi, painted koi fish, and he worked very, very conscientiously and very hard at the relationships of the shapes to simulate movement and motion through the water. And this was his primary reason for painting these koi fish. But he said when people came up to him, they always commented on what a beautiful job he did on the scales. When people look at this painting, they're probably going to remember those sharp teeth, but it's the contrast of those little details that make the spontaneity and the explosive quality of all the action even more effective.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Our second award of merit goes to Karkit Chand. This is called the Imlastage.
Congratulations. Thank you. I can relate to this painting. One of the magazines several years ago asked me to define my style of painting and come up with a name for it. So as we were sitting around the table at home, we were coming up with all kinds of things, urban impressionism. And the more we talked, the more nauseating it got. And finally, my oldest son says, "Dad, I know what style you paint in." And I said, "Well, please share that." And he says, "Anal retentive." The love of detail. So here's the danger of this style of painting. You create a painting that is so filled with little interesting bits and pieces that the painting begins to compete with itself. The viewer enters this painting and then gets hung up on the little details and loses sight of the entire scheme of things. So what Karkit did here so very effectively was the utilization of the white of the paper. Now, there were some pseudoscience studies by Joseph Elbers back in the 60s where he had people go and sit in a room, stare at a painting, and with a rheostat, he'd dim the lights until the lights went out completely. And then he would slowly bring the lights back up. And the last thing people saw and the first thing that they perceived was the white. And the lesson that we can take away from that as watercolorists is how important the white of the paper is. And the white will ultimately attract and hold the eye. So you have to be very, very judicious in how you use it. This slide does not really convey the values as well as they present when you look at the actual painting. And I would suggest you do that because the white draws you through this painting. And then the job of the artist is to provide us some interesting stops along the way. As you lead the viewer through this maze that you've created, you're prioritizing all the time. This is the most important, the figure in the background with the white on his forehead. And then as you move forward, things get less and less important, and it's this prioritization that prevents the painting from becoming too chaotic. And the secret of that is the use of white, which was handled very, very skillfully in this painting. Congratulations.
Our last award of merit is Wing Prey, and it is called Badlands.
Yeah. Nice turnout of award winners. Nice turnout of award winners. Congratulations. When we talk about art, you will sometimes run into the phrase graphic. I'm a retired public school art teacher. During my tenure, the industrial arts programs in most schools all but went away. I think there was a high degree of liability and a high cost of operation, and they were replaced by graphic arts programs, which was basically computer-assisted advertising art. That was easy and it was cheap. So oftentimes now when we see the word graphic, we think of graphic arts and we think of it in this context. The actual meaning of graphic when we're describing art is flat. And if you are an artist who leans toward graphic presentation, you have quite a challenge on your hands. You can't fudge anything because you're dealing almost exclusively with very bold, very hard-edged shapes. And the relationships of those shapes becomes critical. You would be very surprised if we were to go and change just a few little things about this painting. It would lose its effectiveness. So when you are dealing with flat, bold graphic shapes, you've got quite a challenge on your hands to make that painting hold together as a painting, make all the shapes work. Rather than become too overtly graphic, there is a little bit of texture in this painting, a little texture on the wall, a little texture on the stocking cap, a little texture on the jeans. But again, pretty much in that 80-20 ratio. So what we are looking at here is a very bold statement, a very graphic statement, and a very, very well done and unusual painting. This is not the typical approach, I guess I would say, to what we think of as transparent watercolor, and it's very refreshing and fun to look at. Congratulations.
We have a risk of, if he moves too far forward, your eardrums will all be broken by feedback.
Yes.
And Kathy will be pushing at that too. She's sitting out there. All right. So we mentioned before that Wet Paint had donated a substantial amount of not only gift certificates, but also merchandise this year. By far and away, they were the highest contributor of our awards. And like last year, we need them as a sponsor award. So Anastasia Hen with cello practice is the winner of Wet Paint.
MNWS. Congratulations. Texture. Texture is one of the elements of design. It's key to what we have in our toolbox. Of all of the elements of design, texture appeals to us not intellectually, not emotionally, but tactily. When I was teaching, we used to take kids on field trips to places like the Walker and the Minneapolis Art Institute. And in spite of all their publicity about community outreach, they hate it when the orange school bus pulls up. Because all these little monsters come charging out of the bus, and if they see something cool, they want to put their hands on it. That's what texture does. It's so, so evocative. Now we're getting...
It's neat.
Can you turn it off?
I put my light on.
Do you have a switch on it?
What's that?
E from my mind, burn it. Yes.
I killed it.
So texture is so evocative that if you paint and you discover texture, it's hard to know when to stop. And the problem with texture is it has the ability to engulf a painting. I have seen paintings that are defined as abstract paintings that are done by somebody who has just made a lifetime study of texture and all the ways you can make texture using paint, pushing paint through lace, dropping alcohol in the paint, all these amazing textures. And every time you make a texture like that, and we all do it, we all look at it and go, ho ho, cool. And the next thing you know, you have this amazing array of texture, and you've lost the painting, you've lost the design, you've lost the structure. This is an excellent use of texture. Usually when we think of texture, we think of rough texture, texture that you can feel. Smooth and glossy is also a texture. And in this case, we have texture in the background, and we have texture that is fairly pronounced, texture that you would expect if you ran your fingers across, you'd feel a surface there. And then, juxtaposed within that texture, we have the beautiful, smooth, translucent passages, the skin, the face, the arm. And I think that as you are led through this painting, it's those passages of the very smooth, sensuous texture that leads your eye through up to the music, brings it around in a very convincing circular pattern, keeps you within the composition, doesn't shoot you out the edge, and gives you an opportunity to enjoy texture for what it can bring to a painting and keeping it under control. So the texture the painting doesn't become all about texture, but it is very important part of the painting, and it helps convey this lovely contemplative scene. Thanks, Jeff.
So much.
So the Emmerich Stordahl Founders Award has gone to Karen Knudsen. So I both Karen's watching it, so I know she's still languishing in Florida right now, where it's warm. Yeah. This is called Reflecting on the Future.
Hello, Karen, if you're watching. The first adult workshop I ever taught was years and years ago in White Bear Lake, and Karen was one of my first students. And she really listened very closely to what I had to say. And she went out and worked very hard furthering those concepts and principles. Now, Karen Skur is to the point where when I am teaching and I want to make an example of a particular concept of design, I sometimes point to Karen's work and I say, this is what it's meant to look like. Karen is a natural designer, and I say that knowing full well that there is no such thing. You become a natural designer after you work over a long period of time. It begins to become intuitive. But when you are able to do that, you can do what Karen has done here, which is to combine realism and pure design and pure abstraction. That's a difficult thing to do. So what you have to do is introduce some of the abstraction, some of the design into the representational aspect of the painting, so the two come together like this, that you don't have two separate entities that are competing. And I think this painting captures that, that very effectively.
So our third honors goes to Patricia Sherfood. Now, I hope I said that right, because Heidi told me how to pronounce it. So if I didn't pronounce it correctly, it's her fault. This is Rhapsody in Blue. Is she here too, Lisa?
Somebody's gonna know.
Congratulations. Should we look at the camera, Carmen? Great. Okay, time to talk about content. When I think about a story, I like to reference Hemingway. Hemingway's gift was that with very, very few words, he could create a picture in our minds that would exceed anything that a writer could do on paper. And he did that by simplifying and moving right into the essence of what it was he wanted to tell. I think it's a good thing if a painting tells a story, but the story has to exist in the eye of the viewer. If you start out with a defined story and you want to make your painting about that story, if you want your painting to tell a specific story, be aware that once people look at it and figure out the story, they have no need to look at the painting any further. They're looking at your story. What you want to do is give the viewer just enough hints here and there that they can come up with their own story. I think this is probably one of the more content-driven statements that we've looked at tonight. I think it definitely tells a story. If I were teaching a class in short story writing, I might bring this painting in and put it up and say, all right, go home and write a short story. We'll see you next week based on this painting. And I have a feeling if there were 20 people in the class, we'd probably come up with 20 different stories. But I think everyone that wrote this story would be very invested in their story, and that they would be able to justify what they were seeing and what they were feeling based on this painting. And that is the way you like to deal with content. You like to give the viewer just enough information that it sparks them, that it engages them. Now they're part of the painting process. They're part of the painting. And what you have to learn early on is when that person comes up to you and relays the story that they see in the painting, you just have to smile and nod. Don't tell them they're wrong. I had some paintings, abstract, mixed medium abstract paintings that were being sold in a gallery in White Bear Lake. And for practical reasons, I had to give them titles. They had to be able to keep track of the paintings. So what I did is I took a California State Highway Atlas and I would just flip through and close my eyes and point to a city, and I would call this one Van Nuys and this one, just so I had a title. And I sent a bunch of paintings down, and the gallery owner called me up and says, you forgot to name one. I said, what's your favorite city in California? She said, San Diego. I says, that's it, San Diego. So they named it San Diego. About a year later, I was delivering some paintings into the gallery, and the owner said, here's, I want you to meet this lady. She bought one of your paintings last year. And I said, which one did you buy? And she said, San Diego. She said, our family had just gotten back from San Diego, and we thought you just captured it beautifully. My good friend Stephen Quiller was in the act of selling a painting out in his gallery in Creed, a very expensive painting. And the lady was writing the check, and as she's writing, she says, we really love your paintings of Colorado. He said, funnily enough, this one is Wyoming. And she said, what? And walked out of the gallery. So if someone sees content in your painting, that's a good thing. You've hooked them. And make sure you're supportive of what they think. So your assignment now before you go, we're going to pass out paper and pencil, and we could do it.
Priscilla.
Thank you. Nice job.
Our second honors tonight goes to Daniel Kuchenbecker for painting a treasure.
Congratulations. As watercolorists, we're all certainly familiar with landscapes. When I first began to be actively involved in the art of watercolor, we were known as the medium of barns and boats. That movement had replaced the previous movement, which was lighthouses. Then it morphed into florals. As I say, these fads come and go. Just having nothing to do with this particular painting, but you know what the number one category is now of paintings entered in shows? Anybody care to guess? Portraits. More portraits coming into American Watercolor Society, National Watercolor Society than any other category. These things come and go. But when we think of landscapes, we tend to think of beautiful landscapes. And there is a whole world out there that is not beautiful. It's gritty and it's real, and it's something that we all see all the time. And if you can take a gritty landscape, a landscape that most people bypass because it's not pretty, and you can make a piece of art out of it that has impact and conveys emotion, I think you've done a good thing. Now, other than the choice of subject matter, obviously old abandoned cars, it seems that these old farmsteads always seem to have a school bus on the property. Somehow, I don't know where that comes from, but there's a great deal of credibility in this scene, and the spontaneity. These are all cast-off objects. They're not carefully placed. I can't remember the artist's name right now, but they were he had a plein air class, and he was driving around in the country, and he passed a farm that was just filled with all kinds of cast-off stuff, cast-off equipment. So he asked the farmer, he said, I have a painting class, we'd like to come and paint your farm, are you okay with that? And the guy said, sure. And then he said, well, we'll be here tomorrow. They got back and everything had been cleaned up. Now, there is something going on here more than just the choice of subject matter. And again, I would like you to look at the painting close up. It doesn't necessarily show it on the slide, but the quality of the mark used in this painting is very, very supportive of the choice of subject. If you look at the indications of undulations in the ground in the foreground, they're very scratchy. It's as if the paintbrush were just dragged over the surface. When you look at some of the pieces of standing equipment, the line quality has a harshness to it, almost a jagged quality. This is a realistic, representational, representing a less than beautiful scene, and it would not make sense to use beautiful, refined, flowing brushwork to create this scene. The choice of how the paint was applied to the paper is very supportive of the subject, and it all works together to convey the sense of place and realism. Nice job.
You know, there's 2 bags left. We could just split them.
Pardon?
There's 2 bags left. We could just split them. Yeah. Yeah, okay, well, we'll share. So first honors goes to Mr. Turner. It's way in the back. So this piece is called Star.
You went out to warm up his car. As a medium, I think we all realize that watercolor is special. We didn't get off to a great start. The Brits did us no favors when they started painting in watercolor, because what they were doing is just adding a little tone to sketches so they could take it back in the studio and do real paintings from it. And this was sort of the state of the watercolor medium for many, many years. And where we really came into our own was starting in the late 40s into the 50s and 60s with the California fast and loose painters. Robert Wood, Rex Brandt, Morris Shubin, And then that evolved into Frank Webb, who we sadly lost last year. I think one of the real proponents of this California Fast and Loose style now is Ratindra Das, if you look up his work. And the thing that these artists all had in common and built on and made watercolor a prominent medium was spontaneity and transparency. Now, why is transparency important? Well, if you look at an oil painting, the light hits the surface of the painting and bounces back at you. It's just like this wall. This wall here is probably a latex-based paint, which is acrylic. When you look at a watercolor, you're looking at a piece of bright white paper with transparent veils of color laying on top. You see the paper. The light bounces back at you through these veils of color, and that gives the sense of transparency, the luminosity, and the absolute irrepressible quality that watercolor has over any other medium. And if I were to look for an example of all those things I just said, I think this painting really, really exploits the strength of our medium. Spontaneity, freshness, transparency, and at the same time conveying a sense of time and place. I think it's got it all going.
Great, Skip.
And we always save the best for last. And that is Georgia Candico's Artful Doceit. And if you didn't see it, make sure you see it. It's hanging on the back of this panel here. Doesn't show up nearly as well on this. Georgia's not here.
No,
Oh, she's
sadly.
going in action too. Oh,
Bella White chicken.
okay. Someplace.
Can I tell you a quick Vanna White story? Like everyone else, I laughed at Vanna White for years. I made a career out of turning numbers. And then I saw her in David Letterman, and she told a story, and my estimation of Vanna White skyrocketed. She said, "How do you stop from laughing when the whole world can solve the puzzle and the contestant still wants to buy a ball?" She said, "No, we're used to that." People are under a lot of pressure. They're on television. There's a lot riding on it. She said, but one time we actually had to stop the cameras because the cameramen were laughing so hard the cameras were shaking. And she said, "We don't like to stop taping." She said the puzzle was Gone with the Wind, and the contestant said, "I'd like to solve the puzzle." She says, "Done with one hand." So that's my Vanna White story. Portraiture has become extremely popular. Portraiture, in the classic definition, was someone with money approached an artist and said, "Please make a likeness of me." And as long as the artist was able to make a flattering likeness, they got paid. John Singer Sargent made his living doing portraits, and toward the end of his career, he began to hate portraits. He wrote to someone, he said, Sargent was in the trenches in World War I. He said he learned to anticipate a request for a portrait in the same way that he learned to anticipate incoming artillery during World War I. And that was the state of portraiture for a long time. I really became interested in portraiture when I saw a portrait by Janet Rogers. It was her 14-year-old niece, and she asked her niece to pose for her while she painted her picture. And Janet made this picture of this 14-year-old girl. Now, I taught, so I'm fairly familiar with 14-year-old girls. And this 14-year-old girl was sitting there staring at the camera going, "Whatever." And fine. That is a 14-year-old girl. Janet captured it. It wasn't necessarily this 14-year-old girl. It was all 14-year-old girls everywhere. And oftentimes the portraits we see now are loving portraits of beautiful, charming grandchildren who are the most beautiful human beings on the planet. And occasionally you will have a portrait that will make a broader, more universal statement. I think this portrait certainly qualifies in that regard. I think this is a portrait that you can't help but engage in. It's not necessary to know who this person is, but you can certainly find enough things there to attract your eye, to hold it, and to celebrate the spontaneity of this individual captured beautifully. Very nice job.
I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to see all the artists' names in one place. These are all the artists that were accepted into the show. We had a lot more artists whose pieces did not get in. I am so glad I didn't have to make the decision because I do feedback, Steffi. Because it would have been impossible. Good job, John, just figuring out what to come in because there were just as many good pieces that did not get into the show. So thank you to all of you who dedicate your time and your artistic talents to make this show what it is today.
We have one more.
One sec.
Okay.
There's one more prize which hasn't been awarded yet, and it won't be awarded until the end of the show. So please do vote for the People's Choice Award. The thing is in the back. Write down the artist and the name of the piece because there are a few artists that have two pieces hanging in a show. So do vote. It's important because that is a really special not that John's opinion isn't good. But all of our opinions are also equally important when it comes to People's Choice.
So, absolutely.
And then John has something special he wants to talk about before everyone leaves.
We have one last announcement. A sad announcement. Carr Keats' father-in-law, Duluth artist, teacher, mentor, Chinky Chi, passed away on Monday. I'm sure many of you know Chinky Chi. You may have had the opportunity to take a class from him. TWSA, Transparent Watercolor Society of America, is going to present a Chinky Chi Memorial Award at the exhibition this year, which is coming up fast. If you have any inclination to donate to this award, it would be greatly appreciated. And she contributed so much to so many people. He was my first instructor, and I credit everything I know today about watercolor to the foundation that he laid when I was beginning. And if you go on the TWA website and go to donations, you could make a donation to the website. And we
TWS.
TWSA, what did I say?
TWA, I think they went out of business.
That's right. That's right. TWSA. So thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to come here. I always enjoy seeing everyone. Thanks a lot.